大家好，欢迎来到我的小博客。Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Victoria and we are learning Chinese together here. Chinese language is the only pictographic language that is still used. Maya glyphs and Egyptian hieroglyphs are all long gone, but this is still in use. And not just somewhere at the backyard of our civilization. It is used by every sixth person in the world. I've been learning Chinese for many years, but I still find Chinese characters mind-blowing and fascinating. But for some reason, textbooks don't teach us the different types of Chinese characters. Maybe they think it's not important, but I think it's super important because the way you learn them, the way you remember characters actually differs on the type of those characters. So in this video, we're gonna dive into the 6 types of Chinese characters, and we're gonna see that not all of them are just pictures, and not all of them follow the same logic that woman plus child equals good. Okay, let's start. And the first type of Chinese characters is pictograms or 象形字. Pictograms are highly simplified pictures of regular everyday objects. Sun, mountain, elephant, these characters are all pictograms. They all evolved from a picture, from a graphic representation of an object, into some simplified character of this object. When we think about Chinese characters in layman terms, we probably imagine that all of them are pictograms. And most of them did evolve from pictures, but in modern Chinese, only 4% of characters, maybe even less by some estimates, belong to this category. The good thing about this category is these characters are always the simplest characters and probably the first that we learn when we just start Chinese. And it's always curious to see how these pictures evolve. Many books show this evolution of pictograms, and it's always fun to guess what this character looked like in the past. And also, these are the characters for the most basic objects, the things that people saw in everyday life, things that they used, or things that they hunted for. Pictograms are the characters that Chinese teachers often use to kind of trick you into thinking that, oh, Chinese characters are so easy, look, they're just pictures. But after all, 96% of modern stock are not pictograms, and it is important to know how other groups were formed because it makes learning much more logical and much easier. Okay, so let's proceed to the next group, and the next group is simple ideograms or 指示字. This is an even smaller category than pictograms, and these are direct iconic illustrations of some abstract things. Think about icons on your desktop. It is very simple, very graphic representation of something. The most common examples of these characters are 上, on, and 下, under. Numbers also belong to this category. So these are the characters which cannot be drawn, but can be illustrated by some visual symbol, like convex and concave. Our next group is compound ideograms, or 会意字. These are those famous riddle characters which we all love so much. You put together sun and moon, two brightest objects in the sky, and you get明, which means bright. You put together a woman and a child, and you get 好, good. You put together a man and a tree, and you get 休, which means to rest. You put together two people and you get 从, to follow, and three people make a crowd, 众. You put together two trees and you get a grove, and three trees give you a forest. So these are the characters which are made up of two pictograms or simple ideograms. And the meaning that you get together is a combination of those two. The meaning is logical. There are about 13% of modern Chinese characters that belong in this category. Okay, so we had pictograms, simple ideograms, and compound ideograms. And this is where all the fun with characters ends, because this is where the apparent logic stops. The language and the culture were developing and people ran out of pictures. There were many new words, including abstract words, which just cannot be represented by pictures or even a combination of pictures. And this is where we get our biggest and most illogical group, phono-semantic compounds, or 形声字. So phono has something to do with sound, with the way we pronounce a character, we read a character, and semantic means meaning, what the character actually means. These characters are by far the most numerous in modern Chinese, about 80% of the stock, and in these characters one component represents a meaning and the other component represents a sound, how we read this character. I intentionally do not refer to components as radicals or keys. You probably know about that table of keys, yeah, and some teachers actually ask their students to learn it, which I am absolutely against. You do not need that, because that table is merely an index by which you use to look for characters in a dictionary, in a paper dictionary. Of course, we don't need that nowadays. We have smartphones, and even if we use paper dictionaries, we use those where words are arranged by pinyin, by the pinyin alphabet. In older dictionaries, the characters were arranged according to this table of keys, table of radicals. So nowadays we don't use that. And we don't use the term key or radical to speak about components of a character. Look at this set. 井, 进, and 讲. The first character, which means a well, is a pictogram. It looks like a graphic image of a well. But then the second and the third are phono-semantic compounds. They have a phonetic compound, which hints at the pronunciation, and a semantic compound, which hints at the meaning. There are two major things to remember about phono-semantic compounds. First, the phonetic compound only hints at the pronunciation. It doesn't mean that the pronunciation is going to be the same for this whole set. Both initials and finals can change a little bit. For example, ji can be changed into qi, yin can be changed into yin, and also there is no indication of the tones. Phonetic compounds do not show you the tone of the character, unfortunately. And second important thing, the semantic compound, the compound which shows the meaning of the character, can be to the left, but not always. There are many different structures for a character, and the semantic and phonetic compounds can be arranged in many different ways. Let's look at a longer set. Here we have the character 青, which means green or blue, and then serves as a phonetic compound for a huge set of other characters. There are many more, but most of others are very rare and you don't need them. But even in those which are commonly used, you can see the similarity of pronunciation, and you can find qing in all of them. So group number 5 is transfer characters, or 转注字. So apparently these refer to pairs of characters which at some point were one character but somehow diverged. The most common example that I see when I research this topic is 考 and lao. So in the past they were one character which meant old. Then through maybe some mistake, maybe some dialect variations, at some point there were two characters that were used for the same word that would mean old. But the language doesn't really need two characters that would mean exactly the same thing, so one of them evolved into a new meaning altogether. And now we have two different words, two different characters, lao, old, and kao, which means to test. So transfer characters were once one character, and then one of them developed a different meaning. And our last group of characters, which is loan characters, or 假借字. This is actually also a very interesting group. I find it fascinating. Some of these characters have really interesting history. And one of the examples in this group is the character 我, which means I, me. This seems like such a simple character, such a basic character, but apparently it appeared long after many other objects were named. So there was a time when there were many names, many characters for different objects, but no character that would mean me. So there was this character which meant some kind of an ancient weapon. It consisted of two very simple pictograms, a hand and a spear, and at some point it was borrowed to mean I, me, maybe because it sounded the same. And eventually it lost all the reference to that weapon, and the only meaning that we have is that borrowed meaning, the meaning me. Sometimes both meanings are kept, as for example the character when. If you look at the composition of this character, you're gonna see two pictograms, an ear, and it is surrounded by a door. It looks like somebody's listening at the door, right? So the original meaning is very transparent, yeah, to listen. But at some point the character was borrowed to mean to smell. And now we have two meanings. This character means both to listen and to smell. But the original meaning is kind of archaic, and it is only used in set expressions, in proverbs, in chengyu. For example, in the phrase 所见所闻. In modern language we usually use 听 for listen and 闻 for smell. Okay, so these are the 6 types of Chinese characters, and now that you know these types, you can analyze the characters that you are reading, that you are learning. I hope that this way it's gonna be much more fun and easier for you to remember them. Okay, thanks for watching. 谢谢大家耐心观看，下次再见，拜拜。